Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Healy from the Laker News. I will be your host and moderator tonight for our Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank Candidates Forum. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are on unceded ancestral Mi'kmaq territory. I have worked hard on top of my regular work to organize the following Candidates Forum to provide residents a chance to ask pressing questions to our candidates running about local and provincial issues that impact our area to gain your votes for the August 17th provincial election. I want to point out that this live stream is courtesy of Matt Dagley from Dagley Media. We also have Lyle Mailman as a timer. Daniel McKenzie is on sound, and on Twitter it is being live tweeted by Katie, Katy, not IE, well known from her COVID briefings live tweeting. Hi, Katie. There were many questions submitted, which we narrowed down to the 16 that are being asked tonight. We do have a time limit of up to 8:20 p.m. for the last question to be asked, and I think we can do that. So candidates, let's hope that we can do that, right? And oh, by the way, my tie is courtesy of Fall River's own rock star, Dr. Strang. The candidates forum would not be possible without each of the candidates. The LWF Hall for allowing us to use their facility. To newly appointed FRABA President Steve McClellan with a message.
Thanks, Pat. Steve McClellan here, the newest president of the Fall River and Area Business Association, also known as FRABA. I want to take a short second and say a big thanks to all those that are running. You guys have my respect, and I know you all want to make our communities even better. And those that are watching, I urge you to vote and get everyone you know to go out and vote. It's very important. I've been lucky enough as a financial engineer and member of FRABA to see how policies can either help or hinder growth. And I think we're here, and I think everyone watching would agree, Nova Scotia has a huge opportunity, instead of talking about all the potential that's out there, to actually start sharing success stories. So go out there, vote for who you think is going to help take Nova Scotia to that next level. And once again, I want to thank all those that are running. You have my respect, and I wish you guys and gals nothing but the best. Take care. Back to you, Pat.
Thanks, Steve. Now, let's begin our candidates forum. But first, I forgot to introduce our candidates. So much on my mind, sorry. Our candidate for the PC Party, Brian Wong. For the Liberal Party, Marnie Tuttle.
Thank you, Pat.
For the NDP, Christina Mccarron.
Thank you, Pat.
And for the Green Party, Anthony Edmonds.
Thanks, Pat.
All right. I did a randomized online generator draw to decide how they're doing for the rounds. And round one, we are going to start with Anthony Edmonds and then work his way left. That's right, right? Right? All right, the first question. What are your views on raising the minimum wage?
Are we doing opening statements or should we?
Oh, yeah. Okay, opening statement. Blah. See, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's all right.
Introductions. Marnie first. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Marnie Tuttle, and I'm proud to be the Liberal candidate for Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank. I want to take a moment to thank Pat, FRABA, LWF Hall, and the other candidates for making this possible. In particular, I want to thank Christina for fundamentally changing the ballot. It's been almost 20 years since we've seen a woman on a ballot for MLA in Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank. This election is about choosing the team that will take us forward for the province. We're going to need people who can listen, people who are thoughtful, and people who can represent our communities at the table. Because what comes next is a new era in history. But what I want it to be and what I'm willing to work for it to be is an inclusive recovery and an inclusive era and an all-encompassing recovery. I want to work for a recovery that sees women who have left the workforce because of childcare and layoffs return to work and be paid what they deserve. a recovery that includes new Canadians and Black and Mi'kmaq people of Nova Scotia sharing in the growth and the opportunities ahead for our province. A recovery that is thoughtful in taking care of our environment to meet and exceed the climate goals of our province and our country. It's about a recovery that sees us not just returning to what we were over a year ago, but looking to what we can be in 2 years and 5 years and 10 years and 50 years from now. Because it matters what comes next. It matters to me and it matters to you. The recovery is more than the economy. It has to encompass the solutions we need in our community. We live in a unique area. We're neither truly suburban or truly rural. In our communities are families that have been back here for generations and families who arrived just last year. Our response has to include the seniors who have made this riding their home, new families who have just discovered what a great place this is to live, and the youth who want to stay here. I've worked with those groups on the small
Cut.
scale. I've listened to their needs and worked to address their concerns. What I'm asking for today is to give me the opportunity to continue to do the work on behalf of the community. A vote for me is a vote for someone who will listen, who will represent, and who will meet your needs in the community.
Okay, next for the introductions is Brian Wong.
Thank you, Pat. So I am Brian Wong. I am the Progressive Conservative candidate for Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank. This is my second go at politics. I did run in 2013, and I'm very pleased to be back again. So I am very lucky to have raised a family in the historic community of Lakeview for 8 years. And then very lucky to have moved to the newer part where a lot of development is happening in our communities in St. Andrews West for 10 years. So it's been a great community to raise kids and have families. And that's one of the things that I really want to focus on if I'm elected as MLA, is to make sure that we have good facility, good infrastructure to move forward with our families, and that we stay up with the growth that's going on. I'm an educator for 27 years. I possess a master's in business administration and a master's in education. And I've always used those two things and binded them together to really find solutions for students and solutions for families to try to move them forward. The reason that I got back into politics is because in our school system and in my personal life, there are mental health issues, and mental health is one of the key issues in schools right now. Tim Houston has made a commitment to fix mental health in our healthcare system. We have difficulty even in this constituency to hire guidance counselors in schools because it's a burnout job. It is so much work, and we're lacking it in our system as well. Therefore, Tim Houston has made a commitment to have a separate department of mental health and addiction services, as well as fix healthcare by first recruiting and retaining doctors. We have a plan for that. At the other end, we're really looking at long-term care. We need more long-term care beds. We have 2,500 people waiting for them, and healthcare is our major issue right now. Thank you.
All right, Christina Mccarron.
Hello, I'm Christina Mccarron. I'm from Wellington, and I want to thank Pat for having this forum, and FRABA, and all of my fellow candidates. Thank you for the kind words, Marnie. And I have lived here for 23 years and raised my 3 children here, and love the area and the schools and the people. That's why we're here, because of the wonderful people that are from this community. And I volunteered with scouting and the school system and sports, and I just think the people here are the best. And my children all have many friends from here as well. And I am running because I'm come from a political family. My mother ran in 1984. She was the first woman to run in Cumberland Colchester federally, and she's paved the way for women like me. And I think she'd be really proud if she were here today. And my aunt and uncles and all kinds of family members. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And when I was laid off during COVID, I said, I'm going to do it. So here I am. So he's got his hand up.
Time.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll wrap it up. I was just going to say that I am running for the people that can't go back to work because they don't have before and after school care, and for the seniors who, when they ring their bell, nobody can come because they're overstaffed. And thank you very much.
Yeah, candidates, the green is like 1 minute. The orange is 30 seconds. And once that hits the table, Daniel will cut the mic. So sorry for that. My head's all over the place. All right, now introduction from Anthony Edmonds.
Great, thanks, Pat. We're going to hear about a lot of problems tonight. We've had a lot of crises lately, just sort of one after another. I think the silver lining in all of this has been that we can really all agree on what the problems are now that we're facing. It's climate, it's inequality, it's housing, it's healthcare, it's mental health. And on top of all of that, there's a feeling that governments just aren't listening. The one thing that these all really have in common is that they probably could have been averted with better planning. So we need to stop reacting to crises that we're in the middle of and start preventing them from happening in the first place. Let's just look at healthcare. They say that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So Greens have had this philosophy for a long time in our healthcare planning, and it's really great that I'm now seeing other parties sort of take this to heart. But we need a lot more of this attitude because the challenges are just going to keep coming. For example, right now there's a boom in remote work, and so we're seeing people move back here from other provinces. Now, this has some upsides to it, but it also means that there's going to be a lot of strain on our housing stock and on our infrastructure. So depending on the decisions that we make now, this could become the next crisis, or it could be an opportunity. With the right planning, it could revitalize rural areas and bring jobs back from big cities. On the heel of a tragedy, it could be an opportunity, but we need to seize it. So to do that, we need to stop looking backwards and start looking forward and try to build a better province for our children. So how do we do that? Well, the key to plan more than 4 at a time is to stop worrying about who's going to get credit for it. If I'm in the legislature, I'll work with members of any party for good. I will never criticize a good idea simply because it didn't come from my side of the aisle. And above all, I will put constituents first and petty partisanship behind us. Thank you.
All right, now we will begin round one with Anthony Edmonds. What are your views on raising the minimum wage?
So I think everybody anticipated that this would really be a big issue in this election, and it's a prominent part of the NDP platform to raise the wage to minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think when that sort of fight for 15 movement started, that was a much more ambitious goal. There's been a few years of inflation since then, and that's actually become a bit more middling. The official Green stance on this is to peg minimum wage to inflation and then try to make up the gap between there and where it ought to be with other forms of government supports, namely with a guaranteed livable income. I'm really a proponent of this because I think it recognizes the changing reality of our workforce. 1 in 8 Canadians, I think now, works in the gig economy in some capacity. This is predominantly people who are underwaged, younger people who are largely disenfranchised and who might, be attracted to a higher minimum wage. But the reality is that many of them wouldn't actually materially benefit that much from raising the minimum wage. The fact is that a lot of these systems are built around the idea that we have sort of this nuclear 1950s household where there's a single breadwinner with a full-time, probably unionized job who has enough income to raise a family, buy a house, and have kids and all of that. But that's behind us now, and we have to look to the future. And in the future, work is precarious, and people are underwaged. People are moving from job to job, have variable hours. And I think the way that we address this as a society needs to recognize that by providing people stability, because that's important, not just to make ends meet. It's very important for that, but it's also important to know where your rent's coming from week to week when you're on a variable income, because this affects mental health, and this affects, in turn, all sorts of social determinants of the health of our society. So I think we can do better than just saying, well, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Thank you.
Christina, the same question.
Well, the Gary Burrell, that is one of his platform promises, is to raise the minimum wage to $15. And I think it will greatly help our economy to do that, because that money, even that isn't enough, I think, but it's a start. And I think that it's mainly women that are working for these wages. There's customer service jobs. And I think that if we raise the minimum wage, more money will go back into the economy recovery.
Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. I have the good fortune to work for the Nova Scotia SPCA, and a little over a year and a half ago, as an organization in the nonprofit and charitable sector, we made the decision to make $15 our minimum wage. I believe that's a step that employers can take, and it doesn't require government intervention to be the beginning of that. The government commitment is to continue to support people in their jobs and employers in their ability to hire. And I think it's aspirational and it's important that we look at what a living wage needs to be in Nova Scotia, that we look at what the job opportunities are, and that we look to see how we can match those two up so that people can make a living wage doing work that they're valued for. Thank you.
And Brian.
Well, you know what? I think we all agreed that that Nova Scotians need to make more money. However, small business is the backbone of our economy, and 80% of Nova Scotians work for small business, and that's what we need to concentrate on. So by guaranteeing and setting a standard of $15, it depends on the employer. It depends on the nature of the business and the economic times. So just to say that we're going to have $15 is going to put a lot of pressure on a lot of small businesses. We've had a lot that have already closed over COVID because government picked and chose exactly who was going to stay open and who was going to benefit and who was going to suffer. So what we have put forward is the Better Paycheck Guarantee, where the tax money that a corporation would pay would actually go back to the employees. So and not the top 20% of the people in the corporation, but therefore the corporation has a choice, either pay it to the government or pay it to your employees to increase their discretionary income. The other thing we have is the Nova Scotia Loyal. It's like Nova Scotia Loyal means let's buy from small business, let's buy craft beers, let's buy foods and whatnot that are produced locally, and that will bring money back in the economy as well, and keep our tradespeople here. We have an incentive program that if you're under 30 years of age and you're in the trades, is that you will get a tax break on your first $50,000 of income, and that will keep young people here. That will help grow the economy by keeping them here. They'll buy houses, they'll raise their families here, and they'll have more income at the end of the day that they choose what to do with it and not the government. So I grew up in a small business in Digby. My dad was an immigrant from China, and I do know the benefits of small business and making sure that a wage is attainable for the employer and that people get paid well. So I think that we have the best platform going forward in order to bring the economy back on track, especially after the COVID crisis. Small business is where we need to put our focus on. Thank you.
All right, Anthony. With the current housing crisis raising rent and housing prices skyrocketing due to out-of-province buyers raising property taxes, what will you do to support Nova Scotians looking for a place to live?
It's interesting the way you phrased that question. I think you meant to say property prices rather than property taxes, but I think therein lies actually part of the solution.
I think it's the way it was received.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a really good segue actually, because I think part of the problem that we're seeing is that we're seeing a reflection of the same sorts of market trends that happened in other large Canadian cities in Vancouver and Toronto, where there's an influx of capital into these investment properties, and people like pointing fingers in many different directions. Oh, it's people from a different province, it's people from Ontario, it's people from outside of Canada, but it's all of the above. And of course, the reason for that is that we've set up a system where we have sort of a perverse incentive that, in fact, it's a really, really good vehicle for speculation right now to buy real estate. But that's all sort of backwards because, in my view at least, I think the point of real estate is to provide housing and places for people to live, not to be used as an investment vehicle. Like it's like we're buying tulip bulbs or Bitcoin or something like that, right? So I think really the steps that the government needs to take are steps to make sure that speculation becomes less appealing. And one way to do that might be, perhaps controversially, to raise property taxes and rebate some of that back to people who actually live and work in Nova Scotia, so that people are less incentivized to speculate on property and more incentivized to actually live there. Thank you.
Christina.
I think that there should be a cap on rental increases, and I think that there will be more and more especially in our area. I think that there's quite a number of, now that we're on municipal water, we'll have more buildings going up, and there will be more rental properties in the area, because a lot of young people I've talked to on the doorstep are complaining that there's no place to live and there's bidding wars on houses. So I think that we really need to work on that to have more places in this area.
Marnie.
It's a very interesting question. It was one that was asked in an interesting way that can be answered in a number of different avenues. So I had a conversation on the doorstep on the weekend with a woman who was fundamentally concerned with where seniors could be housed and how they could afford to stay in this community. Her concerns were related to her personal experience, but she also had the foresight to look and say, how do young families come into this community and into this market if we're in this crisis? There is there is sort of a low income aspect to that. And then there's also the experience that we're having in Fall River, Waverly, and Beaver Bank right now, in that it's just hard to find a house. Housing is speculation is rampant. The houses that are going at over market value are significant, and it's creating challenges across the way. So aspirationally, what are we looking for? We're looking to answer all of those questions. There are some excellent pieces in the Liberal platform about providing more affordable housing and inspiring our developers to create those spaces in our communities that are affordable to families. Thank you.
Brian.
Pat, could you repeat the question? Because I didn't quite get the nuance when you and Anthony were going back and forth,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
With the current housing crisis raising rent and housing prices skyrocketing due to out-of-province buyers raising property taxes, what will you do to support Nova Scotians looking for a place to live?
Well, so number one, those out-of-province people moving back to Nova Scotia are very welcome, and I don't blame them for anything, because when we say over market prices, suddenly that actually becomes a market price. So the problem in the system right now, it's a question of supply and demand. In other words, we have very little supply, and so therefore prices are going up. So one of the things we have to do, we have to increase our supply of housing at all levels. Now, affordable housing has been an issue for a long time, and it's never been properly addressed. However, I have a perfect example of my mom lived in Waverly Manor, which is a seniors apartment building in Waverly. And it is subsidized by the province. And the beauty of it is that there was 15 people that live, 15 one-bedroom apartments, and but only 15 people there. And the way that it works is that she paid 25% of her monthly income. So therefore, she paid about $500 a month for a beautiful one-bedroom apartment, but it also had a common room so that the seniors had, they had friends, they could do things together, they had a barbecue and whatnot. So we need more options for seniors and for young people trying to get into the market, but especially for our seniors. I've talked to seniors at the doors and said, I'd love to go there, but I have a pet. And that pet is the person, or that's what keeps me sane. That's what gets me through the day. So we need more flexible options for seniors, and we need to increase the supply at the other end so that young people can afford to rent an apartment, and low-income people can afford to rent a house or an apartment, and to get into the market for their first purchase. So it is simply a question of supply and demand, and government can help with that as well. And we plan to do that.
Thank you. Anthony, in past elections, Beaver Bank was split into two ridings, despite most of the Beaver Bank residents' kids going to school at Lockview High. What can be done to make better community connections for Beaver Bank with Fall River and Waverly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I'm really thrilled to see Beaver Bank sort of made whole again and joined back up to the rest of the district. For a while there, it felt sort of gerrymandered, where there's this notch taken out of Beaver Bank that was really, at least politically, in terms of our MLA, separating, Beaver Bank from Windsor Junction and the rest of the district. So it's good that it's made whole. I think, and this is probably something you're going to hear from me a few points tonight, and how I'm going to answer a few questions. I think one of the key answers here is actually going to be better transit. So there is bus service to Beaver Bank, but there isn't to most of the rest of the district. If there were better interconnections in terms of transit, that would enable things like, high school aged kids who are certainly able to go and take the bus, to be more able to go visit each other and hang out and spend time in community spaces together, to be in some of the same after school programs or recreational programs and things of that nature. So I think we could do a much better job in sort of tying our community together like that. And really the way to do it is to make sure that people have the ability to be brought into the same physical spaces and actually, spend time together in a way that they can't necessarily easily do right now. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I was going to say something quite similar because I think that transit is a huge issue and traffic congestion. And yes, Beaverbank has some transit, but I think that Fall River is sorely lacking. And I think that if you're a young person, you have to have a car, or you have to, there's just no other way to get around because the bus just doesn't come anywhere near where they need to get it. So I think, we'll probably get to that later, but I just think that as far as Beaverbank and our area goes, we do need much better transportation options. Thank you.
Thanks. Marnie.
I'm absolutely delighted to see that Waverly Fall River Beaverbank now includes a whole Beaverbank. The Beaverbank being split across two MLAs had made for less ability to have big projects happen, a split voice instead of a common voice around their concerns. And I think it's interesting the question came around connection, because I think there's an even broader question there, and hopefully we'll get to it later. But I think the path forward for connection is to follow the youth. Our youth are connecting at Lockview High School. They're making friends. They're participating in sports. They're participating in activities. They're getting to know each other. And it's our role as the parents, the grandparents, and other people in the community to participate with them, to watch them play their sports, to come to their activities. And I think an important part of that is to see us have the infrastructure around the Beaverbank in particular and Lockview that will encourage and make possible those opportunities. In particular, we've heard about a turf field that I think would be a great place that would bring together many generations and many groups of people and help Beaverbank have a better connection with Fall River and Waverly. But it needs to go both ways. We need infrastructure in Beaverbank that encourages our youth, our seniors, and our adults to spend time out there as well. Thank you.
Well, you know what? I do like the idea that Beaverbank is back together politically, but we're talking about political lines, which are imaginary lines drawn up by politicians and bureaucrats. I think Beaverbank is very unique, and I'm not sure if Beaverbankers really want to be part of Waverly and Fall River. And the reason is that we have nothing to bring community together. So where do people that live in Fall River and Waverly get their groceries? They usually come to Fall River. Where do people that live in Beaverbank usually go for their groceries? Well, you know what? They probably go to Sackville. So that part of it, it doesn't really hold a lot of water when I talk to people in Beaverbank, when they have, the largest ATV club in Nova Scotia, and they have lots of issues and stuff at that end that is getting very little attention. So one of the things that we do need is that we do need infrastructure in all of the communities in Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank, and not just recreational, but we have a humongous tax base here that we're not getting anything in return. Recreational facilities, roads. We don't have a Beaverbank connector. There's one way in and one way out. So when you talk about Beaverbank, I think that if we start getting some infrastructure in all of the communities that we deserve, I think we'll be much better off. One of the things that I think that we deserve to see is some kind of an EHS hub or a mental health hub for our kids. And I do think that one of the mistakes that we made in Nova Scotia a long time ago, and I don't even know what government was, is that we amalgamated our schools. We took the sense of community away. So we need to start to think creatively on how to fix that. And we can start by, how about a turf field? How about a swimming pool? How about an arena that we don't have to go out of our community for our kids to participate in all of these things? And I think that's the way that we bring community together. Thank you.
All right. Back to you, Anthony. This next one might be a bit of like two questions in one, and I don't know how to reword it, but do you feel that the removal of elected school boards improved communication and collaboration to improve success and well-being within school communities? Why or why not? If not, what would you recommend instead, and would you promote legislation to change it? Maybe that's 4 questions in one, but
It's a doozy, yeah. I guess, well, starting with the first part, in terms of whether it has improved communication with communities, it's not clear to me that it has, and it's my understanding that from the get-go that wasn't even really the goal. I think the intent was more to I think it was a cost-saving measure. It was sort of my read on it, although I could be wrong. I don't know the intent of the people who made those decisions. In that respect, maybe it was successful, but as I think there have been many different opinions expressed on, whether we were better off with school boards or without. I think many people feel that we were. And I think moving forward, whether or not we go back to having elected school boards, difficult to say, but definitely we do need to have some way of making sure that people have their voices heard. And I think right now where it's a very sort of top-down approach to things, I don't think that that's happening. So I would suggest that perhaps what we need to have is people whose jobs it is specifically to liaise with educators in order to make their concerns heard up at the administrative level, as well as perhaps with parents. I know each of those things are happening, but I don't know that there's someone whose job it is to do both of those simultaneously, other than through sort of normal administrative paths, like through principals and things, and they've got too much on their plate as it is. But one idea, I guess. Definitely it's an area that I think could be done better. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you. Christina,
I'd like to hear the question again, please.
do you feel that the removal of elected school boards improved communication and collaboration to improve success and well-being within school communities? Why or why not? If not, what would you recommend instead, and would you promote legislation to change it?
I think that the school board members should still, I think that it should still be that way. And I think that the teachers and the parents should have a say in how that is and who is elected to be on that board.
Marnie,
I have the great pleasure of having 4 kids across our school system. I have 1 in Waverly this year. I'll have 2 at George P. Vanier and 1 at Lockview. And I have to say, I do not have any issues with the communications or the education that they're receiving. The teachers that we have, the principals that we have, the guidance program that we have been exceptional. So I want to make sure that any comments that I make are not addressed to the people that are in the system. Is there an opportunity for improved communications from the community up to the HRCE? Absolutely. And I expected a question around this, so I took the time to reach out to our Department of Education and find out how we can make that happen as a community. So what we have is a system that allows us to have SACs, and those SACs get to collaborate with the school administration. And those 2 groups together have the opportunity to influence what's happening at HRCE in terms of money that might be dispersed around school improvements or communication tools. And what we can do as a community is put those 2 pieces together to have a common voice, a single direction in our communications with HRCE, and have those pieces go forward to the Department of Education in a way that benefits our community. Thank you.
thank you. Brian,
Well, that's interesting. You know what? SACs were formed after we got rid of our elected school boards. The truth of the matter is our elected school boards were doing a great job throughout every sector of the province except for the Halifax Regional School Board. That became a bone of contention, and the Liberal government decided to axe it. SACs, in theory, it sounded really good, what Marnie was just saying about how they should function and why they function. I have been the principal on 2 different schools as the SAC. Principals are non-voting members. So I have an in-depth knowledge of that. If I don't have enough time to really discuss it in 2 minutes, so if anybody has a question for me, please contact me later. Each school gets $5,000 if they choose to have an SAC plus $1 per student. And really the SAC, the makeup of them and the communication that they have and influence they have over the school is very minimal. They very often take the actions of what the principal is kind of leading towards, because there's not a lot of expertise on the SAC, where our elected school boards were totally invested and worked with their own their own communities. So they would be representative in Lockview at every corner of the community, or in HRM. So we really had a full idea of what was going on and what was needed. And I do think we need to get back to our elected school boards. SACs are not working the way they were supposed to. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to round 2 with the questions, starting with Marnie and then going to the left of her. Like a lot of areas in the riding, traffic is an issue, but more so in Beaverbank as development of more subdivisions get approved and built. Currently, there's only one way in, one way out, so if something major happens, you're stuck in traffic. What would you do as an MLA to fix the traffic issues in Beaverbank and the speeding issues in Fall River?
Thank you, Pat. I live with this every day. I live on Wingate Drive. The fastest way out for me is to jump onto the Beaverbank Road at a next to impossible left-hand turn, getting onto Beaverbank Road. There are significant safety issues and there are significant speeding issues in both of those areas. There is an opportunity with the upcoming Traffic Safety Act to work in partnership with the councillors and the municipality to find solutions in each of these communities that work for them. I have the experience and the relationships to make that happen, and I would be proud and pleased and persistent in going after solutions that are appropriate for Fall River, for Windsor Junction, for Beaverbank, and for the other communities that are experiencing difficulty with traffic in our communities. Thank you.
It's an issue, a connector in Beaverbank or a connector, whether it's in Wellington or whether we're doing traffic calming, no matter where it is. And there's a lot going on right now, but it's an issue that affects the municipality and the province. And we do need to work together and we do need to be collaborative. And I think any ideas, no matter where it comes from, has to be, really considered. I know the Beaverbank connector have been spoken about for a long time, coming off of Marginson Drive up to 25 or 30 years ago. That didn't happen for them, and now there's another opportunity to maybe hook onto the Aerotech connector, and that's kind of been tabled as well. So Beaverbank is truly stuck right now, and I am absolutely willing to work with the community and the province and the municipality to come up with a solution for Beaverbank. Beaverbank has been left out once again. So as far as traffic calming, we have it all across Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank, and that is something that we do have to work together. I do see traffic calming happening. It can be effective for the people, the law-abiding citizens that tend to follow the signs. I know when I see a sign, if it says 60 and I'm going 62, I slow down. But for the people that don't follow it, some of those bumps and stuff, they like to see how fast they can go to get over them. So we do need to work as community, and we do need to work together. And like I say, it doesn't matter where the ideas are coming from, as long as we find an idea that works for everybody. And I have lots of experience working with community as the principal of 3 different schools over 14 years. That's what I do. And I'm willing to work hard for you. Thank you.
Anthony.
Yeah, so in terms of a Beaverbank connector, as Brian mentioned, there have been plans in the works for a long time now to make one through Marginson Drive. Now, I've looked at the plans for that, and I guess I should qualify right up front as a professional engineer. I have to make a distinction that this is not my professional opinion as an engineer, but I've read the environmental assessments on that. I've read the plans. From what I understand, there aren't any substantial issues in terms of sensitive ecological areas or wetlands or anything like that to the Marginson Drive one. Now, those reports are, again, like 20 years old at this point, but from what I understand, the biggest issue at this point is funding, and it really is on the provincial end. There was an understanding between the municipality and the province at one point that they would jointly fund this. From what I understand, the municipality is still very much in favor of this. The issue has been that although it's been included in transportation and infrastructure renewal plans multiple times, it keeps getting pushed back in terms of other priorities, I guess twinning highways or something. So I can say without reservation that I would definitely support making that a priority for provincial funding to the extent that's possible, because it's very clear that there's a very, very bad bottleneck there, which can represent a lot of significant problems when there's construction or things like that, not only in causing delays and stuff, but it's also very much a safety issue. And I think accounting for the potential human cost, it's definitely the sort of thing that would be worthwhile. And I think that really is the correct route to take. Now, in terms of traffic calming, I guess we're talking about Fall River specifically, but all over, that certainly can be an issue. And I see it being perhaps even more of an issue there in the Beaverbank area. The connector, I think, is going to help a lot with that in terms of other more localized traffic calming measures. That really more so is a municipal issue. But where that's something that we need to make it viable to have multimodal transport for people to be cycling and walking and things like that, it's got to be a priority, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
And Christina.
Okay, I think this is one of our biggest issues in our area is traffic. And I think that the heavy trucks coming down the Beaverbank Road, if we had a connector, so they have three parts. They had the roundabout was phase one. The phase two was the 5A connector to Wellington right beside my house. I was opposed to that, but it's gone ahead. So I think that we could link up Beaverbank to the Enfield and get people on the heavy trucks on the 102. And I think that we really need to look at our public transportation is a huge issue. I don't know why they have the Fall River bus up on, by the highway. You can't get to it safely. There's no sidewalk. You could have the bus come right down the one or the number 2 highway and go right to the airport that way. And another thing that really bothers me, and I've mentioned it many, many years, is that we have the rail line in all of these areas, Wellington, Beaverbank, Fall River, and Windsor Junction, and we don't use them. We could have a GO train and cut back significantly on all the traffic. Instead of taking out 5 kilometers of trees in Wellington to do the connector, you could have, easily gone with a GO train. And the other thing is bike lanes as well. The bike lanes stop just past my house at Sunnylee Road. And if you go, I bike every day to Fall River, and there is no shoulder to bike on. So there's all kinds of issues that we have with traffic. So, thank you.
All right, next question is, candidates, please give me an example of a project you have worked on in the past that you felt passionate about. And start with you, Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. That's hard. I've worked on a lot of projects in our community, but maybe the one that I'll talk about is the one that got me started. I had been volunteering on boards across the province when somebody recruited me to the Windsor Junction Community Center. They were in a difficult situation. They had extended their building, but didn't have the funding to complete it. They were in a difficult situation with their relationship with the municipality and the councillor around their funding. And I was able to come in to rebuild that board with a number of really fantastic volunteers, secure the funding, raise the money, again, with a group of volunteers, and chair that organization as it went through a transition to accommodate the community that it was now serving. It had been an excellent facility when I was there as a kid. It was an excellent facility before they recruited me in for that project, but it had been outgrown by the size of the community. And I get to be proud about that every day when I drop my kids off at camp. There's a building that is serving our community. It is one of the largest employers of youth in our community. It provides the home base for our baseball program and a beach where our community can gather and participate. It's been a remarkable road from there, and that was what got me started before I participated in the LWF baseball, the LWF Ratepayers Association, and sports boards across the province and locally. Thank you.
Brian.
So in 2007, I took on the establishment of an experiential high school, one of the very first in our province. And I work in the Annapolis Valley, so I've been traveling the 101 for 27 years. So this is an alternative high school for at-risk kids. When I say at-risk, I mean they're at risk of not being in school if they're not in our school. And we were at the very grassroots, and we now term them our experiential high schools. Because we know that not every student can be successful in our school system the way that it's set up now. So we offer very small class sizes and learn by doing instead of sitting in class and learning from a book. So we take kids to Bear River First Nations and spend 3 or 4 days there where they really learned Mi'kmaq history. They're learning their history there by doing instead of learning from a book. We do overnight canoe tripping. We do winter camping. We do all kinds of things in unique ways to find solutions to move kids forward. And the objective in education is move kids to the right. In other words, every kid has to have the opportunity and the resources put towards them that they can improve. We built our school to a point where we became one of the provincial models. And at the end, before I left the school, we had other jurisdictions come to our school and just to see how we established it and how we're successful and how we connect with kids. That's probably the proudest thing I've ever done in my career, and probably the thing that I'm most proud of, to find creative solutions to help people move forward. I did it with hundreds of students and families by working with the community, and I will do it in Waverly, Fall River, and Beaver Bank if elected.
Anthony.
Thanks. Yeah, this is actually really great to learn these about these things about the other candidates. Really enlightening. So a project that I'm actually very proud of is something that I'm involved in sort of right now, not at this exact moment, but in addition to my full-time employment as an aerospace engineer and running in this campaign, I also have a second job working with a startup in Dartmouth on some cutting-edge biotechnology. So it's actually a company that makes advanced filtration technology for recirculating aquaculture systems. So the idea is, instead of sort of the open pen systems that have become quite controversial and been much protested, where you're basically just setting up a net in a bay and feeding salmon there. Instead, you bring it on shore, you have the fish in a contained sort of pen or like a pool, and take the waste from the fish and recirculate it through filtration systems. So I'm actually working with a company in Dartmouth that's designing these sorts of filtration systems, which is fantastic because it's a cutting edge advanced technology with a huge future. And it's happening here in Nova Scotia, and it's just to have that world-class expertise in our province, something that we can export to the world and make the world a better place, is incredibly exciting. But the unfortunate reality of it right now is that it's difficult to make these sorts of things commercially viable because it largely relies on sort of the goodwill of the proprietor of the aquaculture operation, that they just want to do better environmentally, because as it is, our governments are largely just allowing open pen operations to operate with impunity. But the technology is advancing, and I'm really proud that I'm part of that, and in that sort of little way, making the world a greener and healthier and more sustainable place. Thank you.
Christina.
I am most proud of, from 2006 to 2014, I was a Scout Cub, Beaver, and Scout leader for 2nd Wellington. And at that time, we didn't have enough leaders, and all 3 of my children wanted to be involved. And 2nd Wellington was the first Scout group that allowed girls, which is I'm really proud of. And so we did everything from, we camped everywhere in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick that you could think of. We learned wilderness survival. We volunteered for Feed Nova Scotia. We did highway cleanup twice a year. We did shoreline cleanup twice a year. And the children learned how to survive if they ever were lost in the woods. And it was a really great group for, just learning things about the real world. I'm most proud of that. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Next question is, what do you see as the 3 biggest challenges facing the Waverly Fall River Beaver Bank riding, and how would you overcome these challenges?
Well, the 3 biggest challenges I'm hearing about on the doorstep are around traffic, and around housing, and around community investment. So I think, given the opportunity to be MLA, I have a voice on all of those things. Around traffic, there is, like I said earlier, a new traffic act coming into play that allows the MLA to work with the municipality to make real change around how cars move around our community and what that means. I think in terms of community building, I bring the experience of having brought together groups and had them accomplish big goals. And in the position of MLA, I'd like to be their voice at the government level of government to have the support that they need to accomplish those big goals. I'm excited about the opportunity to bring together the groups that have exciting and interesting plans around housing and how that will change our community in a positive way by providing more opportunities for people to stay in our community as they age or come back to their community when they are done their education. Thank you.
Brian.
Well, the environment, number one, for us, because of what happened in Grand Lake and the tragedy of 2 pets dying because of the algae that was in there and the woman becoming very sick. So our Department of Environment has not been communicating with anybody around the lake. It's really a shame to go to Grand Lake right now and see no boats being launched or very few cars in the parking lot or people enjoying it. So that communication piece that we need with the Department of Environment to really open up, make sure that our lake system, our canal system are safe and that people know how to enjoy it. What is unique about Waverly, Fall River, and Beaver Bank is exactly our trail system, our Shuby Canal system, our lake system, the trails for ATVs and whatnot. That's what makes us unique and that people want to live here. So that is big. Seniors, I've run into a couple of seniors whose spouses are in Ivy Meadows right now. And Ivy Meadows is closing down. There is no plan. They have no idea where their loved ones are going or how they're ever going to get there to visit them because they're seniors. They don't necessarily have licenses and can drive long distances. So that is an issue in the community. And the other one is traffic. And we talked about Beaver Bank Road. There's a couple of really simple solutions that we can do there. You know, have a left-hand turn lane at Stokel Drive by Avery's, for example, or, you know, a roundabout right around where Beaver Bank Station is. Like, there's some simple things that isn't going to cost a lot of money that we don't need to spend $1 million or millions of dollars on putting a connector in there. Those are the issues that I'm hearing at the door.
Thank you. Anthony.
I just want to add on to something Brian said about lane changes. Another obvious one is the bottom of the Fall River exit off the 118 onto Perrin Drive. There should really be a right turn lane there for the buses and those who live on Perrin Drive or going to the DOT facilities there. So I guess I named a few big things that I'm hearing at the doorsteps in my opening statement. I'll just pick a few of those. I'll skip over healthcare because I have a feeling we're going to end up talking about that a lot. So I'll talk about housing shortages, sort of making ends meet, and climate change. In terms of housing, again, we already spoke about this a little bit, and clamping down on speculation would be helpful, but it really is a supply problem, as Brian said as well. I drew a short straw going after him because he's taken all my talking points, but yeah, no, we really do need more housing supply. And I think the key to that is going to be making sure that that we recognize there's not a one size fits all solution. And so we need to have a variety of different ways of supporting housing. So that's going to mean a combination of things like affordable housing mandates, but also subsidies for them from the provincial government. Also things like cooperative housing and many options. The Green Platform has a whole section on this. I'll have to leave it there. But then in the interest of time, I'll also double barrel the other one, climate and making ends meet. To me, those things are intrinsically linked. Over the next few years, we're probably going to see energy prices continue to rise. But there are ways that we can curb this. For example, operating an electric vehicle is much cheaper than operating a gasoline vehicle once you can get going, but we need the infrastructure in place. We need incentives for dealerships to actually stock them. These are things the provincial government can make happen. And then when it comes to, say, paying your electricity bill, well, I've got a rooftop solar installation that covers almost my entire electricity bill, but there is a substantial upfront cost and there's a little bit of risk in that. So, I'm an early adopter. Other people aren't going to take those risks. But by subsidizing those things, the province can leverage its ability to take on debt in order to make investments in the future that will pay future dividends for Nova Scotians in a very, very real, meaningful way.
And Christina.
I am hearing similar things on the doorstep. Number one is traffic congestion. People want to lower the speed limit on the number 2 highway to 60 or even 50 would be better because cars go by about 100 past my house. So as I already mentioned, we need better infrastructure and public transportation so there's less cars. And number 2 is housing issues as well. Many people have had to leave their community because there aren't enough affordable apartments or townhouses to live in. And number 3 is also environment, the blue-green algae. I go to Laurie Park every day. My dog was in the water that day that we got the advisory. People are swimming there and boating there now. They don't care because they haven't done enough assessments. They're just saying use it at your own risk. So people are. And a lot of people think that it came from Oakfield Golf Course, but there aren't enough environmental assessments happening with what is going on in Grand Lake right now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question for Marnie. Due to the doctor and nurse shortages in hospitals and the overworked and understaffed paramedics, ambulance wait times are significant. What will you do to resolve these shortages to better serve Nova Scotians?
Thank you, Pat. I think there's excellent work starting on this project right now. There has been an decrease in the wait times once ambulances are at hospitals for offloading. There has been investments in in having people move through and flow through the emergency room department more quickly so that there aren't the backups of ambulance wait times. But these are just the beginning. There's more work to do. We need to look at what is causing the bottlenecks. And more importantly, I think we need to look at what is getting us to the point of needing an ambulance. There are people who are not able to manage their ongoing health concerns because they're not accessing their primary health provider in a meaningful way. And I think the movement that we're making in terms of making sure that every Nova Scotian has access to virtual care while they wait for a family doctor is important. I think the numbers that we have already recruited that are waiting to come into our province in terms of physicians that will support our communities will take a piece of that as well. And I think there's a general sense that we can do better as a province and that there's an opportunity to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian.
My mother was taken by ambulance from Waverley Manor in 2017 to the infirmary. Now, the ambulance drivers, the paramedics were excellent, but once she got to the infirmary, we sat there for 5 hours for her to be offloaded, and the whole corridor at the infirmary was full of paramedics with one patient there waiting to offload. So when we say wait times and things have improved and that there's plans in place for things to improve, it's been 8 years under a liberal government where we are not better off. And in 2013, after I did lose the election, my wife said to me, she said, Brian, she said, what are we going to do? It's like things need to get better. And in 8 years, things have not gotten better. So when we talk about primary healthcare providers, well, you know what? In 2013, there were 25,000 Nova Scotians without a family doctor. We are now at 70,000 people without a family doctor. We are at 2,500 people waiting for long-term care beds. And the Liberal government they're only going to build 500 of them because they say we don't want to overbuild. So you know what? There are some issues in healthcare, and we have a plan to fix it. We have a plan to recruit and retain doctors by offering them more money and offering them a pension plan and treat them with respect so that they'll stay in Nova Scotia and raise their families. We have a plan to hire 2,000 care workers to help in long-term care so that people get the national standard amount of care hours per day. To say that we have a plan, well, there's been 8 years of Liberal planning, and this is the state that we're in right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I steal that from you, Anthony? Sorry.
Yeah. No, in fact, I am going to echo a lot of what Marnie said and what Brian said as well. And I think I'm going to also echo some of what I've said, that this is one of those cases where I think we all recognize what the problem is. Looking at this, from every political stripe, we see that there's a problem. We know that it needs to be fixed. And by and large, we know the sorts of things that need to be done to fix it. But I think the problem is, as Brian's pointed out, that, we've heard this before. It's been a number of times we've been promised these things and it isn't happening. I'm going to suggest that this is not necessarily from a lack of vision or a lack of good intentions, but it's from a lack of proper incentives to follow through. And I think this comes back to that question of who gets the credit, because too often there's a tendency to look for solutions that will pay off within the next 4 years. And again, this election, not to be too negative, but we're hearing again lots of these promises of, within 3 years, within 5 years, we're absolutely going to fix this problem. Things will be fine. Just you wait, in 4 years, this problem will be completely solved. And I'm sure, everybody hearing this is a little bit skeptical, and which is unfortunate because we really do need to fix these problems, right? So I think the way we're going to do that is, rather than criticizing each other, is going to be by focusing on each other's strengths. And I'll encourage people to go read the platforms of the other three parties, NDP, Liberal, and PC. All of them have some good ideas on healthcare, and I'm not afraid to say it. I like those ideas. I'll push for those ideas in the legislature. I'll work with members of any party to improve our healthcare system, because this is life or death. It's not the kind of thing that we can afford to play teams about. We're all on the same team when it comes to saving people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. This problem's many tiers, and we lost 24 ER nurses in the past 2 months. My daughter's a nurse at the QE2, and I think that, so if you don't have a doctor, a family doctor, you call 811. They tell you to go to the ER. So last week, a 91-year-old woman sat in the hospital for 9 hours until they had to put her in a bed because she didn't see a 91-year-old woman, and because she didn't see a doctor. And like Brian said, the ambulances are coming and they can't get off because the ambulance attendants have to stay with the person until they're seen. And sometimes it's 5-6 more hours. And there were only 57 beds opened in nursing homes. And that is the problem. We have people in the hospital that need to be in a nursing home, and it costs 4 times as much to stay in the hospital as it does to look after someone in a nursing home. We need more nursing homes. We have a rapidly increasing population. Baby boomers are taking over, and we don't have proper homes for them and beds. Thank you.
On to round 3. I think we're doing really well for time. I think. Brian, Wong, this is the round starts with you. What steps will you and your party do to help reverse the cuts to resource and teaching staff in our schools so our children with learning disorders don't fall through the cracks?
You know what? There's been a lot of good stuff, like the inclusion policy that came down. There are some really good things in the inclusion policy and some really good ideas and whatnot that are already out there. And I think if you spoke to most educators, they'll start thinking that, you know what, we don't need more money. Like, we have good benefits, we make good money. So it's not about that. And it's not even necessarily about throwing money at the system. What it is about is allowing more time for teachers and staff to have professional development to learn the best practices. I just graduated from the province's flagship course program, the Instructional Leadership Academy, which is the high end of instructional leadership, that we're supposed to take what we learn and then teach teachers how to better their practice to help move all students forward, not just the high end students that have no problems whatsoever in school, but the students with challenges, the students that are in their 60s and 70s, the students that have food insecurity or mental health issues. It's to move everybody forward. There's great ideas there. One of the things that we have proposed is that we're going to allow more professional development so that teachers can do it all at one time. Right now, we do an hour here, an hour there. Oh, we got after the staff meeting, we're going to do 45 minutes of professional development. We simply don't have the time built into the system. And the other thing, we're really going to have a look at the curriculum to say, you know what do we need to change? We taught history wrong for 200 years. And when we teach in our schools, it changes attitudes, and the attitudes towards our First Nations people, towards our African Nova Scotian people, was because that's the way we taught it in school. We need to relook at it and to start it all over again, because you know what? It takes generations to change an attitude and to move forward. So as a PC government, we are going to make sure that teachers are equipped with best practices and that we're teaching students
Okay. Anthony.
Great. So I guess I'll tread lightly here because at the risk of maybe opening up some old wounds, I'll harken back to the misty days of a few years ago when we had a strike action by the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. Now, I apologize. There was no strike action by the teachers union. It was a lockout. Sorry. Thank you for the correction there. Brian's correcting me. It was a lockout. Sorry. There was intent for a strike action. Thank you. Yeah. Talk of a strike action, I should say.
no strike action. It was simply a lockout by the provincial government.
Right. And that is an important distinction. But the reasons for that, so much of the outcome of that was largely embodied in the Glaze report. We saw a lot of changes come top down from the province, sort of forcing changes onto things. And I think a lot of the open conflict around that and the publicity around that, I think the big story sort of lost what was actually at hand and the reason that teachers were disgruntled in the first place, which was that the classroom conditions really were just not there to allow them to do their jobs well. And I don't see much evidence that that really has improved. And I think the question was about support staff. And I think that's really a very significant area where we haven't seen the investments made that are needed to make it possible for teachers to do their jobs. My mother is a career EPA. She's nearing retirement now, but she worked for many, many years in schools dealing with high needs children. And that's a very intense and stressful job, and even more so because they're incredibly short-staffed. There are never enough positions to actually provide the level of support that they need to in order to ensure that teachers are free to focus on actually teaching and doing the tasks that they need to do. We hear a lot of hay being made about teacher-student ratios, but we very seldom hear about the ratios of support staff. And that's something that's not getting nearly enough attention because, like I said, teachers can't do their jobs without adequate support. And
Christina.
I looked into being an EPA. I'm an early childhood educator, but it didn't pay enough for me to be able to live. So I didn't do it. And I know that a lot of the schools there's not enough EPAs for the students because I've worked in the school system as a volunteer enough to know they don't have enough help. There's more and more children with special needs, and they do not have enough staff for them. And the classroom sizes are bigger. And I've spoke to many teachers who say that there isn't enough room. They have to have outbuildings for now that they have the pre-primary program. So I think that they aren't getting paid enough and they're short-staffed.
Thank you. Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. Knocking on doors in July and going into August means that you have the opportunity to have lots of conversations with teachers. And I've heard a number of their concerns. I've heard about programs that are not addressing the needs in the school. I've heard about the shortage of school psychologists. I've heard about the challenges parents and teachers are having with EPAs. And my commitment when I've been to those doors is that I will be a voice for those teachers, that I will bring their concerns forward. Those are important issues and they affect our children. I think there's some excellent work being done around early childhood education and the pre-primary program, and I hope that those advances mean that fewer children will be in a position to need the resources as they grow older. We're creating a more equitable starting point when students reach primary. I'm keen on making sure that those resources that our students need are in our schools and in our community, and that we're able to provide what students need to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question for Brian. We are losing teens in our area every year from suicide, yet nothing is done to make our community aware of how bad it is. How will you and your party address the issues causing the crisis and help the youth and schools in your district?
Whew. So that's an emotional question, Pat. So I got back into politics because of suicides in high schools, suicide in my family, the lack of mental health support in schools, in the province, to see a two-tiered system of mental health. Because if you don't have insurance, you go on a wait list and you may never get seen. If you happen to have insurance, there's a good chance that you can get a private practitioner. I could go on for a long time about the tragedies that I have experienced, that I have seen, that could have been helped. We don't have enough mental health practitioners in the province, and we don't have enough guidance counselors in schools. It's as simple as that. Kids are crying for help. They have issues at home. There's issues in the community. There are issues within the school, and kids have nobody to talk to. And kids need a champion. And teachers are so busy dealing with the diverse classes that they're faced with. It's like sometimes kids go unnoticed. Kids don't come to school when they have high anxiety or they may be suicidal. They're not talking to anybody. They're talking to friends on social media. They're getting bad advice. But we need to increase our mental health access for everyone. And the PC platform is access to mental health for everyone. Would be the first universal mental health platform in the country. And we are long overdue for it. I don't know when it happened, 25 or 30 years ago. I don't know what the blame is. All I know is that we need to change it, and we need to change it now. And the crisis has gotten worse and worse, and there's been no improvement whatsoever. We are going to have a separate department of mental health.
Time's up. Time's up, Brian. Sorry. Anthony.
First of all, Brian, thank you for sharing that. It's clear that this is something that's very personal to you, and I'm really glad that you're passionate about it, and I'm also really glad that your party has made it a priority. If I'm elected, I would be absolutely thrilled to work really closely with any member of the Progressive Conservative Party or any party to really make that a priority, because it really is something that can deeply affect any of us. I mean, the number of Canadians who are affected by mental health issues, it really can strike anyone at any time. And the fact that we're not really addressing these things for our most vulnerable people, for youth, in schools is really just tragic to me. I've also had someone close to me who struggled with mental illness from a fairly young age. And I think if she had better access to supports when she was school aged, I think it really would have made a massive difference in the outcomes that she would have had, because it was a very, very long journey for her to get to stability, and there was much loss along the way. This is something also that I've also been always very passionate about, and I'm happy to say that there are strong elements of this in the Green Party platform, particularly when it comes to youth. There's an entire section of the platform on youth mental health. And one of the things that I think would be really helpful there is that we'd like to see not just guidance counselors, but also other mental health professionals to be more embedded in schools, to have access to them through the school system, for students to be able to be referred to additional mental health supports through the school system, which could help them, regardless of what their home situation may be like or what have you. I think that the barriers to access are very real, and even when they can be overcome, the supports that are there are woefully inadequate, and we definitely do need to do better. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina.
Thank you. The NDP government is promising same day, next day mental health care for anyone who needs it, regardless of if you have an MSI card or a health card or the means to pay for it. And I too have know friends of my children and friends who have children who have suffered, and they said if they weren't with them, they know that the worst would happen, and they've just been put off again and again and can't get the help that they need. And two of them dropped out of school because they didn't have any support there. And so I think that it is something that I would work tirelessly to help the children who need the help. Thank you.
Thank you. Marnie.
So mental health is something that impacts my family in a really personal way. And the the challenges and the tragedies that we've had in our school systems in the last year, 2 years, 3 years. This goes back many, many years. There are interventions that the Liberal government has committed to moving forward in making mental health a priority by creating senior positions in the Department of Health that will guide that strategy. There's an e-mental health toolkit, and there's meeting kids where they are, providing text and phone interventions for them. So we're raising the importance, we're creating walk-in clinics, there's great opportunities there. But I did want to speak a little bit about what we're doing is only rooted in the science that we have right now. And my family has made a commitment and is participating in a longitudinal study called FRABA that is about providing better clinical information about what interventions work with youth. And we are I'd like to use this forum to promote that study and encourage other people to participate in it, because we want to have the best possible opportunities and options for youth in crisis. And that means we need to understand what they are, and if there are ways that we can help youth before they are in crisis by building the skill set that they need to manage those situations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question for Brian. Considering all parties say they will protect the environment, where do you and your party stand on the mass clear cutting of our forests, the use of glyphosate, fracking, and Owl's Head Park?
Well, I'll guarantee you one thing is that we'll walk the walk on sustainable prosperity of this province, and we will not make backroom deals in order to give up some of our precious protected lands, such as Owl's Head. And if we are elected, we will reverse the decision on Owl's Head and put it back on the list to become a protected property. So you know what? The Leahy report came out, and we truly want to implement everything in that Leahy report. We have the toughest penalties in Canada right now that we're proposing for any commercial littering and dumping, and 20% of the total land and water mass protected conservation by 2030. But as far as the question with clear cutting, is that clear cutting is one of the ways, and that we provide a lot of jobs and stuff in our province, and we depend on that industry in order to provide income for thousands of workers. However, clear cutting can be done in a number of different ways. You can simply clear cut and you can leave everything as it lies. You can clear cut and you can replant. So clear cutting is not necessarily as evil as it potentially is, but we would put an absolute ban on clear cutting of provincial lands unless you can actually manage it properly. And there's new technologies coming out for that. The other part of that is really you have to manage the lots. You have to manage people's properties through silviculture, and there are ways to increase the valuable species in our woods and to harvest them more ecologically, and that we can get the best value out of that product. Because we do have to protect the industry and we do have to protect jobs, but by clear cutting, we're also killing the environment. So unless we find and adopt better practices of clear cutting and replanting, then we will have a moratorium on clear cutting on provincial lands.
Thank you. Anthony.
It's a shame these aren't 4 separate questions. I guess I'll try to be quick with the first couple of things. In terms of spraying of glyphosate on publicly managed lands, I think that practice should be done away with immediately. There's not good evidence that actually effectively provides the solutions that they're looking for, and that it's the best way to do it. I don't think that there's strong scientific evidence to support that practice. I think it should be done away with. Similarly, there's not a great deal of potential for fracking in Nova Scotia, but given the issues that we've seen in other jurisdictions with effects on groundwater and these sorts of things, I'm more than willing to say, let's let other jurisdictions that are more ambitious than us be the guinea pigs on that and try it and see what happens. We can wait until the science is more clear, and until then, I think we should have a moratorium on fracking in the province. In terms of clear cutting on publicly managed lands, I think clear cutting and replanting sounds nice in theory, but in practice, it actually can lead to lower average yields on a given plot of land than if you do a well-managed selective cut, which is often what's done in other provinces. Here in the Maritimes, there's really been a culture of clear cutting on public lands, and people have grown used to that. But if you look at Ontario as an example, in the way that they manage their public lands, the training standards for the forestry workers on those public lands is higher. They're using more advanced and highly skilled techniques, and we could import some of that expertise and do the same things here and get higher yields and actually contribute more to the economy than we currently are by simply sort of taking the low intensity route and doing clear cutting, which actually just takes less labor. That's really the biggest difference. So it's more jobs, it's higher yields, and more sustainable in the long run, and causes less damage to ecosystems. So I see no reason not to do that, as well as, of course, implementing the recommendations of the Leahy report. In terms of Owl's Head, I grew up not too far from there on the Eastern Shore, and to me, it's just shameful the way that there has been no transparency around that.
Time's up. Thanks. Christina.
Well, the NDP will implement a moratorium on clear cutting, and definitely in the use of, I don't know if I can pronounce that word. How do you say it? Glyphosate. Thank you. We would end that. And the Leahy report has a triad. So you either leave the land as it was meant to be, or the next phase would be, protect the wetlands and just take out this tree or that tree so that you can reproduce more trees. And the third way would be clear cutting. So that the Leahy report needs to be, we need to put a moratorium until the Leahy report is implemented. And as far as Owl's Head, I feel it's shocking what's happening. And the NDP, I think that the best way to reverse the Owl's Head decision is at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. Marnie.
I'm going to start where Christina ended off, which is on the Owl's Head topic. I spent nearly 3 years of my life working on the 100 Wild Islands project, which are the islands offshore that are adjacent to Owl's Head. I understand the importance and the value of the piece of coastline, of those properties, and I am willing and interested and engaged in becoming a voice for our community around the environmental issues that the Liberal government will be facing in the future. I have some experience with that and had the opportunity today to introduce the platform that the Liberals are running on from the for the government on environment. In particular, I was excited about the announcement of increasing our protected lands to 17%. I thought there was excellent information in there on the Leahy report, but I will say on the environment, I think we're on the right path, but I do not think that we're far enough along it. And I'm excited to be that voice at the government table on behalf of our community, speaking up for the environmental issues that are important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question for Brian. Nova Scotia disproportionately incarcerates Black and Indigenous people. 15% of women in prison in the province are Indigenous. What will you do to address racism in the justice system?
Well, you know what? A lot of that goes back to education and attitudes. And even to go a little bit deeper than that, Pat, when you look at the attitudes, across North America of our Indigenous cultures, it comes from the way that we were educated. And we haven't had enough of that. So I think one of the things is that we do have to go to the grassroots and put the proper curriculum in schools and start changing the narrative on Indigenous cultures and African Nova Scotians or African Canadians or African North Americans, because we form all of our opinions and whatnot from what we learn, from what we see on TV, what we see on social media, the way we interact with each other. The bottom line is what I see at schools, I see all kinds of kids are out there playing with each other and they don't know the difference until somebody tells them that, hey, there's a difference, and then we point it out to them. So we need to change that. So as far as the incarceration levels and whatnot, You know what? It does not make sense to me that it is that disproportionate. And I think that all becomes part of educating our police force, educating our judicial system from top down. And it takes a lot of cycles. It takes a lot of generations to change that. And we're not out of the woods. We're just beginning. I mean, what we discovered with the hundreds of small children buried in residential schools is it's absolutely tragic. So we have to change the narrative. It starts with education, and believe it or not, education is something I consider myself an expert on, and I look forward to digging deep into those issues, and that's an issue that we cannot discuss in 2 minutes. But thank you for the opportunity.
Anthony.
Yeah, I think Brian's right on the money with education. Certainly educating our children, but of course, I don't think we can afford to wait another generation to improve these things. So I'd lean especially on another thing Brian mentioned, which is educating our justice system generally. But I think we also need to go beyond that. Certainly, educating our justice system is going to be a very important component, and that's very central to the Green Party platform on how to address these things. But we need to take a broader approach as well and make sure that people in all strata of society understand different cultures and how we can relate to each other better, and you know what the positive aspects and values of different cultures are. And I think that it's an area where it's easy to say, well, you know, we, whoever this sort of royal we is, need to do better to educate people. But I think also it's going to be important in this process to make sure that people from marginalized communities who haven't really had a voice on these issues in a meaningful way are given that voice and are made an important integral part of the process to do that educating. That we have Indigenous people, that we have, Mi'kmaq people specifically here in Nova Scotia, that we have Black Nova Scotians, that we have people from the LGBTQ plus community and other marginalized communities who are active participants and really leading and guiding that process whenever possible to make sure that it's not seen as just another special interest box to tick off in the training, but in fact that we can see friendships and partnerships built between police and different members of our justice system and all strata of our society and all of these marginalized groups, to make sure that we recognize each other as friends and neighbors and not as identities. Thank you.
Christina.
Systemic racism starts in the cradle, and I think that we need, like everyone said, more education in home and daycare, more kindness, and more faces, different cultures. We need more in government and schools and police force and hospitals and wherever. We just need more equality and to stop systemic racism. Thank you.
Thanks. Marnie.
I'm going to pick up where Christina left off, which is systemic racism is a central part of this issue. And there are 3 responses that we need to have. We need to have an immediate response that is about how do we stop incarcerating people at a disproportionate rate to the population? How do we, as second, what barriers can we address that are preventing them from accessing a quality of life that would keep them out of conflict with the justice system? And when they come into conflict with the justice system, help them have the same outcomes as the rest of the population. And third, as Brian spoke about, education. We need to make a fundamental shift in how we are interacting as a population and as communities across Nova Scotia. It's been part of my work with a community interest company that I founded with 3 other partners to start to break down some of these barriers, in particular targeting the Black community in the Prestons, where we're working on a project that would create opportunities for education where perhaps the barriers of accessing it because of their high school situation was challenging, that will address housing so that there are opportunities to grow in the community, and we'll look at how that community can support itself. The other piece, of course, is a central piece that Premier Ian Rankin announced before the election was called, and that was the establishment of the Justice Institute that will look specifically at this issue and help people as they move through the process. to become, hopefully to avoid incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you. How are we doing for time, guys? Okay. Okay, we got time for round 4 then. We should. Starting with Christina. Woodbine Mobile Home Park is now our district's largest and most dense neighborhood of affordable housing. There have been long-standing concerns by its residents from water quality, lack of crosswalks, no homeowners group, etc. I could go on, there's a list. What would you do to help support and represent residents of the Woodbine Mobile Home Park in Beaverbank?
That was okay, thanks. That was the first place we started talking to people, because there's a lot of people in there, and I have friends that live there, and I know they have issues with their traffic and the crosswalks, and they have issues in their schools, overcrowding, mold at Woodbine or Beaverbank Kinzac, and HT Barrett. So I know that they have a lot of problems in that area. So I think that we need more, gatherings in that area to talk to the residents and find out what their main issues are and help them as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. I had the opportunity to spend some time in Woodbine over the last couple of weeks. It absolutely is our largest and most dense population. It is probably our primary location for affordable housing as well. And what I heard on the doors is that there are significant issues in that community. Water was definitely mentioned, crosswalks, opportunities for public gathering. Those are all issues that can be solved. And I think one of the first paths forward is to help establish a homeowners association. And that's where my background in community development will be key. There is an opportunity to create a homeowners association that has a powerful voice. There is a counselor in Lisa Blackburn who is also interested in helping. There are issues in this area that span municipal and provincial. And I think there's an opportunity for a partnership between the MLA and the councillor to address these issues. The nice thing about Woodbine is that it is a community and it has an opportunity to make a change, and it has the ability to make that change. Thank you.
So I did, I guess we all were in Woodbine. So I did spend several days canvassing Woodbine as well. I think what Marnie said, I think that a homeowners association is crucial there, but they do have to work with the owners of the park. A lot of people do complain about the owners, as a lot of tenants do, no matter where you are. But as far as the water issues go, Halifax Water has tested at the site where the water enters Woodbine, and apparently the water's good. So the issues are with old infrastructure and whatnot that's in there. So you know what? Since it's such a big community, you know what? There should be some funding somewhere along the way to help an owner to pay for some of that infrastructure in there as well. So we just can't all gang up on the owners of the park. We do have to work with them. So that is part of it. But a homeowners association is a good first step. My first Taekwondo school that I had back in the 1990s, I actually was in Brown Hall. So most of my students came from Woodbine Trailer Park. So, and some of those still live there. So I had some interesting chats and stuff with them in there. One of the things we lack in the community as a whole, Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank, is infrastructure. So you're looking at a community like Woodbine, where there's over 1,000 people that are in there, lots of kids, and there's nothing in there for them to do. How about a nice swimming pool in there as a community or very nearby? How about something for them to do that makes them feel like they're a community? I mean, the roads and stuff are twisted. Some are in good shape. Some aren't in such good shape. And kids, when they walk along that sidewalk along Beaverbank Road, the traffic issues and stuff, it's pretty scary listening to those big trucks go up and down there all the time. So we need to work with the residents in there, do form an association, but also let's not forget that we have to work with the owners as well. And Lisa Blackburn would be a great advocate to work as well. So I also look forward to them if elected as an MLA. I do bring community together as a high school principal, and for 14 years, I work with community all the time to find creative and innovative solutions.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, so I think the question was about the the largest and densest neighborhood in the district in terms of affordable housing, but I believe actually it's the largest and densest neighborhood in the district, full stop, at all. And it really is a really vibrant and great community. And I'm really glad that it is part of the same district now as the rest of Beaverbank and Waverly, Fall River, and area. In terms of a homeowners association, I think a lot of talks have been made about this, and the one thing I'd be wary of is to make sure that indeed the will of the residents of the neighborhood are in fact reflected in that. Not everybody wants to be part of a homeowners association. I'm sure many there very much do, and I think if that's something that is very widely supported in the neighborhood, then it definitely should be pursued. But at the same time, I'd be wary of top-down efforts to force that on people. We should really make sure that in fact what people want there is really what's going to happen, and that we're not just forcing this on them. Now, in terms of what can be done to help improve that area and to provide support there, I think it's a mistake to think that although it's a large singularly owned park, that the interests of the community are very different than anywhere else. It's denser than many parts of the district, but otherwise the needs of people who live there are very much the same as elsewhere in the district and elsewhere in the province. And I think by having things like provincial subsidies for recreational programs, as well as many of the things that we've spoken about in terms of healthcare and making ends meet, I think those are the things that people in Woodbine are really going to care about more so than specific promises for amenities built right there in the park. I mean, it's near Sackville, there's access to amenities, but I think it's a mistake to lump that as being some sort of a different or unique community. It's very much part of the rest of the community, and I think has largely the same needs.
Thank you. Christina, the next question. What are your views on child poverty in Nova Scotia? Do you feel that that poverty exists within this community of Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank, and does your party have a way to tackle it?
Do I think that it exists? Yes, I think it exists in every community in Nova Scotia. I think that we need better access to food banks to help with child poverty. I think that we need better programs in our school to feed children before school and lunchtime. There's a lot of children that I know from working with the schools, there's many children that come to school hungry. They can't learn properly when they don't have a good breakfast or lunch. And I think that there's many people that are very proud and don't want to talk about that. And I think that it is a huge issue, and we need more assistance with food programs to help children. Yes. Thank you.
Marnie.
Pat, could you repeat the question, please?
What are your views on child poverty in Nova Scotia? Do you feel that poverty exists within this community of Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank, and does your party have a way to tackle it?
I believe absolutely that child poverty exists in Nova Scotia and in our riding. I think sometimes in a riding that has prosperous areas like ours, it feels a little bit like it gets left behind. It feels a little bit like child poverty isn't as much of an issue here, and I don't think that that's true at all. I believe that the diversity of incomes in our riding is a challenge, and I think it's important that we're tackling making life affordable for people at a low income level. That said, I think probably what I can share with you is what I saw when I got involved with the Christmas Express. The Christmas Express provides meals at the holidays and toys for families that can't make ends meet over the holidays and maybe can't make ends meet any time of the year. And when COVID hit, I was able to reach out to that group, and we were able to raise money and provide what we called Christmas in Spring. And we ran a series of weekend food box drops. And I know that's not a solution, but it helped in the moment. And what I'd like the opportunity to do in working with government is an MLA is to bring real solutions to the table. I think the announcement of a pilot project for meals, lunch meals in schools is a good step in the right direction. but let's go back and see how we can solve that at a fundamental level so that kids aren't coming to school hungry. Thank you.
Brian.
So child poverty exists because parents have to make a choice. Do I pay my rent or do I buy food? Do I pay my electricity bill or do I buy food, or what type of food do I need to buy? The school system, everything comes back to the school system, and that's okay because we see all kids eventually come through the school system. A lot of schools, most schools, all have breakfast programs, some more successful than others, some better funded than others. Personally, I have written grants for hundreds of thousands of dollars for foods programs and other things to help schools. We called it AV Eats at my high school last year. That was just one of the programs that I did, but my former school, we ensured that kids had a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch, and it truly makes a difference. But it comes down to, let's have some affordable housing so that people don't have to make that choice. And we do have a plan to help with affordable housing. So you know what, if you can afford to pay your rent at a reasonable level, then you can afford to buy better food for your kids. However, there are other issues such as mental health within the family, that parents aren't able to get out, or they choose to spend their money in different ways, or they just don't have the capacity to look after and provide for their kids in the right ways. So even proper access to mental health is going to help out with child poverty and food insecurity, because there are lots of institutions out there that do offer services and do offer grant money. It's a matter of getting community together to write these grants and to make sure that they understand that, hey, this is a true issue in the community, and let's work together to do that. And I've been doing that for 27 years, and I would love to bring my skill set back into here and my efforts in order to work on that.
Thank you. Anthony.
I kind of feel like the person who submitted this question was maybe kind of testing us to see who actually reads the reports on these things, because in the most recent data that I saw, which I think is probably a year or two old, our electoral district actually has the lowest rate of child poverty of any in the entire province. So I feel like that probably deserves some mention, because we should celebrate our victories as well as our problems. And this harkens back to what I said in my opening statement, where, let's deal with things before they become a crisis. So certainly not to minimize the impact of the child poverty that is very real and does exist, albeit on a smaller scale in this district. I see this again as an opportunity. We can potentially eliminate child poverty entirely in our district with the right supports. Now, in the long run, that's exactly like Brian said, means dealing with the poverty of children's families, of adults. And I think the path to that is going to be with a guaranteed livable income. But meanwhile, there are many things that we can do to, I think, address not only the problems from child poverty, but a lot of the stigma. In a district where child poverty is less common, perhaps the stigma associated with it might be stronger. And I think one of the ways we can do that while also improving outcomes for our children generally is by providing more funding for things like school lunch programs. I'd like to live in a province where every child has a nice, nutritious, healthy school lunch provided for them at no cost, so that there is no stigma to the kid who has the not quite so nice lunch, maybe because the parents aren't doing so great right now. Because I mean, I've known those kids. I've been that kid, and it doesn't feel good. It's not nice, and it really does stigmatize these things. And I think, we can definitely do better, and I think we can do it in a way that makes things better for all children and makes a better community where people feel a stronger sense of community, feel together better, and get better educational outcomes to boot. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 2 questions left. I hope I can get them in time. I'm going to try. All right, the next question is on policing. What is your opinion of Nova Scotia having its own provincial police force, and would you support that? Start with you, Christina.
That's a tough subject. Would I support our own police? Yes, I would. I think that there's a lot of problems with the police, and I think that I would support that. I think that, yeah, that's a really tough question. Yeah, it's a lot of my own personal opinion, but I think that there needs to be more accountability from the police and how they handle certain things, like the mass murder in Portapeck. And I think that I would support our own police system. Yes. Thank you.
Marnie.
Wow, that's not a question that I've come across on the door yet, and it's a big one. I think what I can speak positively about in terms of our own force is that I would be interested in seeing police forces across the province that are working better, collaborating better, and having better cooperation. There's an opportunity here, if we're looking at policing, to think about some of those issues we addressed earlier around how can we change the inherent systemic racism that we would find inside the police force and in every other institution in Nova Scotia? And is there an opportunity to work towards a goal where the collaboration and cooperation also means revisiting how the structures are created and who they support and who they challenge? Thank you.
Brian.
So my answer to that right off the bat is I really don't know because I haven't seen the data and I haven't seen the issues and I haven't really seen pros and cons to either one. So, so hypothetically speaking, an individual police officer is most effective when they can build relationships with the community. So a police force doesn't matter if it's a town police force, a city police force, or if it's our RCMP. You have to build relationships, and that's why we have community liaison officers in every school so they can build relationships with the kids so that if something comes up, they can effectively deal with them because they have that relationship. So that's the same thing as teachers. The most effective teachers are the ones with the best relationship with the students. So whether it's a provincial police force or it's the RCMP being contracted to certain towns and municipalities, it all depends on the relationship. And if somebody can prove to me that by having a provincial police force, we can improve relationships and therefore when they go onto calls that they can actually serve the public better, then sure. But you could probably also show me the data going that the RCMP, if we do things a little differently or maybe the status quo with some different protocols and having some more social workers or mental health workers go to doors with them, that could probably also help. So the hypothetical question of a Nova Scotia police force, there is certainly not enough information for me to give you a good, solid answer. But Pat, if you get some information through your journalism stuff, let me know.
Anthony.
I guess this is the one question where the Green Party wasn't caught off guard because this is actually in our platform. So I have lots of respect for our CMP officers. I know many of them, they're great people. They hold themselves to very high standards. But I think where Nova Scotians have really seen a gap there, and it's been highlighted by some recent tragic events, is in how policing is administered in the relationship between the province and the RCMP, where there isn't always good communication and where administration isn't always effective. Now, municipal policing is an entirely different question, but the parts of the province that are patrolled by the RCMP, I would favor potentially phasing that out in favor of a provincial safety force, in order that it could be administered more effectively and most importantly held more accountable. Because I think to do all of these things we've talked about in terms of how we educate our police forces and how we can bring about equity, I think we'll be better equipped to do that if the province has a police force that falls more directly under its own control, as now it falls directly under its jurisdiction, as the province is nominally at least responsible for justice. And yet we see the situation where the province and the federal government are pointing fingers at each other because the province is responsible for policing, but is contracting it out to a police force that's run by the federal government. It all gets a little bit complicated. So I think, yeah, we could do better. We could do better by having our own provincially controlled police force. And there's an entire section in the Green Party platform laying out what that transition would look like, how it would be equitable, and how it could be more effective.
And the last question. As an MLA for the riding, how would you work to bring public transportation to Fall River and reinstate it in Beaverbank?
Me?
Yep.
Thank you, Pat. As I stated earlier, I would have the bus in Fall River come right down the number 2 highway, and I would have the Beaverbank bus come all the way through Beaverbank to Sackville to link up. And I'm also all for the commuter train that would go right through to the city from Windsor Junction, Wellington, Enfield, all the way through. Thank you.
Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. Um, I think we need to be clear on who provides public transportation in this area. And public transportation is provided at a municipal level. So the answer to this question needs to talk about how does the province work with the municipality to make these kinds of projects happen? And we've certainly seen some interesting ones announced over the last couple of weeks, including the ferry service that they're talking about in Bedford. So we need to be creative about the kind of solutions that are appropriate in our community and the kind of solutions that our community at its current density can support, or whether we need to wait until our density has increased. So there are significant transportation issues and public transportation issues in our community, one of them being the access to the bus service that's off the Highway 118 and the lack of safe infrastructure to get there. Now, whether that is active transportation or whether that is looking at public transportation, I don't know what the right solution is, but I know that I'd be willing to work with the municipality to make what is appropriate on Fall River and in Beaver Bank happen. Thank you.
Brian.
I met a gentleman in his 80s whose wife happens to be at Ivy Meadows, and his eyesight is failing and he can't drive. He has difficulty. He has to depend on neighbors in order to drive him to visit his wife. So one of my pet peeves in the area is that we don't have enough of our taxes coming back into our communities. And the growth rate in the downtown core in Halifax has been 3% over the last 5 years, but 25% out here. Therefore, most of our tax dollars aren't going for infrastructure here. They're going for infrastructure in downtown Halifax. So transportation is absolutely part of the system that we need to improve out here. When we have people that can't get to the bus depot because it's an hour walk, and they don't have a neighbor that can drive them there, it doesn't work. When we have seniors that can't see their loved ones, it doesn't work. So we have schools that are falling apart in the community. Oldfield Consolidated was built in 1962 and needs replacing. We need money that we pay in tax dollars to put back into the communities. And I am absolutely willing to support that at any level and work with anybody in order to try to get that done. And one of the things that I've said to everybody at the doors, when we have a conversation about something and I think it's a good idea, and I say I'll work with you, I expect you to hold me accountable to that, and I say that to you. Thank you.
Anthony.
So I think Marnie laid a great foundation here, describing the breakdown of responsibilities between the municipality and the province. In terms of the actual meat of the question, which was how do we get bus service into Fall River, I think the best answer from the provincial government perspective is get that Aerotech connector finished so that the airport loop can make a loop and come back through Fall River, or go out through Fall River and come back on the 102, vice versa. Because I think with the connector there, that would be viable, and probably the municipality could be convinced to make that change with some persuasion from a vociferous MLA. But I'd like to springboard this into a question on a community that hasn't really been talked about, or several communities out sort of beyond Fall River, out in the sticks, I guess, where Christina and I live in Wellington, and also in Grand Lake, Oakfield, Enfield. These are areas that are bordering the county line, and so it's probably never actually going to be viable or make sense for the municipality to provide transit there. That's why the Green Party platform includes providing incentives and funding in order to make sure that transit happens between communities across county lines. So for example, if we could work with Hants County and with Halifax County to have a provincially subsidized joint project to say provide transit between bedroom communities in like Enfield and Elmsdale, which are largely have commuter populations to Dartmouth and Halifax, that might open the door to have some kind of irregular community transit bus service to underserved communities like this side of the border in Enfield or Grand Lake, as well as other outlying communities that otherwise would be neglected if we're not able to push transit across county lines like that. So although it's a municipal responsibility, their responsibility ends right at the border. To get across the borders, we need the province to step in, sort of be the bigger person, and provide the funding and put measures in place to make sure that municipalities want to do these things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now it's time to do the wrap up for the night. We begin with the wrap up statements from Brian Wong.
Hey, I forgot that I was going first. Thank you, Pat. I have lived in the community for 18 years, but have worked outside of the community for the entirety of that. And so I do work in the West Dance area. If elected as MLA, all the efforts that I've put into education throughout the school day, coaching, band parents associations, home and school, SACs, all of those things that I do in the evening, all of that time will come back into this community. And that's something that I look forward to because I have built community over the last 27 years and I have a lot of experience in doing so. But we do have a mandate for change. The Liberal government in 2016, Stephen McNeil's rating was at 16%. His ratings went up because of COVID, and he did a great job of COVID, and I'll never take that away from Stephen McNeil. But there have been 7 by-elections in Nova Scotia in the last 2 years, and the Liberal government did not take one of those seats. In addition, they have several cabinet ministers that aren't reoffering, and the writing is on the wall that there is a mandate for change, and we need change here in Nova Scotia. I do promise to work hard, and I do promise to work with communities. I work with individuals to find creative and innovative solutions that will help you move forward, just as I've been doing for students and families for 27 years. I asked you to hold me accountable, and I expect you to hold me accountable to that. Thank you for your time. I really want to thank Pat for hosting this, and FRABA and the volunteers that are out there doing the timing, doing the tweeting, the cameras and the sound. So, and thank you to the candidates. Have a great evening, everyone.
Anthony.
Oh, I thought I was last.
No, you're second.
Okay, cool.
You were last to start.
Sure.
Or something.
So first, I'd like to thank you, Pat, for putting this together, and everyone else here. We've got a whole team of people behind the cameras who are making this work, and that's really great. I'd also like to extend a very sincere thanks to the other candidates who are here. It's really hard work, what we're doing. It can be thankless sometimes. It's not for the faint of heart, but it really is a public service. And so I really do sincerely thank you. And I thank you for sharing your thoughts and sharing your stories tonight. It's been really enlightening and that's really great. So over the course of the last couple of hours and throughout my campaign generally, I've really tried to emphasize a theme of being nonpartisan. So if there's one takeaway from everything that I've said, let it be that our problems are much bigger than political parties. If I am your MLA, my loyalty will be to you, my friends and neighbors, and not to a party leader. So when you cast your ballot, don't vote for a color, vote for a person. If you think that I could represent you well, then vote for me. But don't wait for someone else to do it first. I've heard many people on many doorsteps say the same thing, that the only thing stopping them from voting green is that they think not many other people will vote green. Let's break that cycle. Let's make history. Let's elect Nova Scotia's first Green MLA. If everyone who wants change actually votes for change, then change will happen. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Marnie.
Thank you, Pat. Over the course of tonight, I hope you've learned a little bit more about me, about my work in the nonprofit sector, my volunteer efforts, my experience building communities, and my experience as a business owner. You've learned that I live in this community and that I'm invested in the future of this community. I want to leave you with my motivations for running. I want to make change in our community and in our province. Some of that change is local, like creating better infrastructure to support people in our community. Some of that is societal change, like including new Canadians, Black Nova Scotians, and the Mi'kmaq people in the growth and positive change that is coming to our province. And I want to see us meet and exceed the climate targets for cleaner and greener Nova Scotia. I've been doing what I can from outside government in my work and my volunteer life, and now I'd like to be your voice at the table. At my core is a desire to do better, and sometimes that's about being a better mom, sister, or wife. Often it's about how I support community projects, and sometimes my efforts are about making the province a more equitable place to live. But I'm always looking forward, because being better at my roles in family and community can only take us so far. We need a province that's on the right path for the environment, the economy, and equity. Finding that path will take someone who has the experience to navigate government relations and partnerships with our district councillor and our member of parliament. Kathy and Daryl are people I know and I like and expect to work well with as your MLA. My commitment at every door has been to be your voice and to find your answers, to share your stories and your needs. I'm ready to be your voice in government. When you go to the polls, please vote for me, Marnie Tuttle. Thank you.
Christina.
Thank you, Pat. I wanted to say thank you to Pat Healy and everybody that's helping today. And this has been quite enlightening and really nice to meet everybody and talk to everyone. And I wanted to add something that wasn't spoken about tonight, and it's about how small businesses were affected during COVID. And many people in my family lost their jobs, and the government supported big box stores because they were deemed essential. And I think that we had a really difficult time during COVID. I don't think we did as well as everyone said we did. I thought we should have tested at the airport much sooner. That's where I was working, at the airport. And I think that what I've learned so far knocking on doors is that people want to see their MLA. I haven't seen Bill Horn in the last 4 years and ever, and I'm out all the time. So if I'm elected, I will be seen. I will be out all the time. I will still knock on doors every week to see how people are doing, because what the NDP stands for is people, and I really love the people in my community, and I will support them and what they want in our community, and I will be out, and I hope everyone will go out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for giving us your time tonight and hopefully providing our residents of Waverly, Fall River, Beaverbank a better understanding of what you can do for our communities if elected as MLA. Residents, the most important thing to do now with this information that you gathered tonight is to vote. So from now, tomorrow, until Election Day on August 17th at the returning offices, please get out and vote. It's how we use our collective voices for the change we want. Go vote. To those watching at home, thank you for watching. Good night from beautiful Fall River. Have a great night, everyone.